It's time for the conclusion of the Fall of X. Welcome to the Comicstorian Complete Story Series, where we take trade paperbacks and single issues and we break them down into digestible bites to help you understand. Then, we read them dramatically back to you. All alterations to the panels, text, and images are to prevent copyright problems, and all art is owned by its respective companies. With the Fall of X nearly completed, it's time to see how the final battle happens and how the X-Men will handle Xavier's decision to sacrifice the humans for the mutants. This is X-Men 33, 34, and 35, the conclusion to the Fall of X. I hope you enjoy.
A short time ago, Sebastian Shaw stared out over the city as the rain poured down. The war raged on between Orcus and the mutants, and Shaw was sure that no matter the winner, he would come out on top. He sipped his drink, looking back at his son, explaining that they needed to make sure that their hand was strong in case something strange happened in the conflict. We must prepare a refuge should something asymmetrical occur. I have secured the deeds to the waterfront property in Madripoor, but I'm afraid there are squatters. Do you think you're up to clearing our lands so a stronghold can be built? Shaw asked, and Shinobi smiled at his father. If it needs doing, of course I will be of service, and I know just the louts to help. A short time later, the Reavers drop into Madripoor, targeting the waterfront slums that have become popular with the island, and the world's worst criminals. The Reavers group out in front of the Princess Bar, and from within, Callisto glances out the window. Aw, crap, it's everyone's least favorite mercs. She groans before whirling on her customers, shouting for them to get down. The wall suddenly explodes inward, and as the smoke clears, the Reavers push inside. Hi, Callisto. I know you can't walk through those magical plant gates anymore, but you could just get on a boat and leave. It's not too late for you, the leader says with a sneer. Callisto struggling to her feet, but the Reaver kicks her hard. Elsewhere, the war is raging on, Emma Frost checking her makeup in a destroyed car mirror. Her mind linked with the mutants of the Resistance, informing them of updates in the battle, warning her team that AIM has begun an assault on the Morlocks tunnels where the Resistance hidden base has been located, where the X-Men are at. Luckily, the X-Men have already assumed that this would happen, and they left them with a small surprise. As the AIM soldiers push through the tunnels, their lights shining into the shadows, one of them glances at their sensors. This is a waste of time, he grumbles, but the leader shakes his head. No, this is a trap. Suddenly, there's a noise above them, and lights flare upward to reveal Wolverine laying in wait. Huh? I think that's my line, bub, he says with a smile before dropping into them, his claws making quick work of the Orcus-aligned soldiers. In moments, the fight is over. Back in Madripoor, Emma is warning of an assault on Callisto and her bar, so she sends backup. The Reavers laugh as they place Callisto on a cross, then motion to the slums. Anyone hiding muties is gonna be treated like one, they call out, but a voice calls to them, and they turn to find Shadowcat staring them down. My friend's not your decoration, free Callisto or die, or free her and die. I haven't decided yet. Kitty growls, the Reavers raising their weapons, and Kitty Pryde launches forward, phasing through their bullets, using their swords to slash them apart. The Reavers then allow Callisto to fall, and Kitty reaches up, phasing her away from the cross. So how's the war going? Seems pretty terrible. Callisto gasps as Kitty supports her. Great, so great. Only thing left is the parade, Kitty jokes, and Callisto nods, retrieving her knife from a fallen enemy. She turns as she approaches. Just tell me we're gonna win this, and save some for me, she snarls as she stabs one in the face. In moments, the Reavers have fallen, but Kitty can't figure out why they're even clearing the slums. I could shed some light on that, Shinobi says as he steps out of the shadows, stepping forward, explaining that his father is trying to play both sides, hoping that no matter what, he'll stand tall whenever the victor is declared. He explains that a tanker ship owned by Shaw is approaching the harbor. On board is one of the leaders of Orcus, Dr. Killian Devo. I'm throwing my lot in with the mutants and playing my father's card for him, Shinobi says, pointing Kitty and Callisto to the ship. On board, Dr. Devo steps onto the top deck, looking around with surprise as a portal opens up and the X-Men leap out. I think I've been betrayed. He smiles, holding up a trigger. Not completely unexpected. The ship shifts around the team, revealing a massive portal that begins to suck them all in. It's imperative that I survive so that Orcus can be reconstructed. These are projectors to the negative zone, he says with a smile as the portal begins to suck the mutants in. Emma tries to reach out with her mind to make Devo shut down the portal, but realizes that he is all machine now. That's when Miss Marvel has an idea. Emma, I need to make a long-distance call, she shouts, and Emma turns to her, reading her mind. Well, Miss Marvel, your plan can't make matters worse, Emma notes, reaching out. In moments, the mental projections of the pair appear before Dr. Doom in his castle. Excuse me, Mr. Lord Chancellor Doom, sir? Kamala asks him, and Doom turns a very angry gaze on them. This had better be important, young women, he growls. Kamala nods, explaining that they need the help of the Latvarian mutants. Von Doom, allow me to show you the predicament that we're in. She then links their minds for a moment, and Doom sees everything that is going on and how Orcus is planning on taking over the planet. He plans on cleansing the world, which is my purview. Very well, Doom says as he holds up a gauntlet hand, turning to his followers. Deploy the X-Men of Doom, he bellows. Another portal on the ship opens and the Latvarian mutants leap to the aid of the X-Men. Volta springs into the air, tossing her spear into Devo's body, disrupting his circuitry, burning him out from the inside. Slag and Nerium rush forward, destroying the negative zone portal, allowing the X-Men to fall to the ground. Slag then turns with a smile to Kamala. Miss Marvel, my mutant friend, he calls out with a high five. Wolverine and Volta stalk forward to Devo, who is burning alive. This can't be the end. Orcus must survive. I must survive. Devo gasps, but Volta grabs her spear and rips it free. Well, you simply don't. She snaps as she destroys Devo, the X-Men thanking the Latvarians with a moment of peace, and Emma then links with Cyclops, who is now free from his prison. It's nice to hear your voice in my head again, darling. Dr. Ayla Grigor is dead, Scott reports, and Emma nods. Well done. Chalk up another high-value target, she thinks, but Scott is slammed into the wall by Nimrod. It wasn't me. It's a long story, Scott thinks, as Nimrod hits him again, the robot glaring at him. You're telepathically telling the X-Men about me, aren't you? If I kill you now, would they feel it? Nimrod ponders, and he throws Scott to the ground, turning away, opening a portal that allows him to disappear. Scott struggles to his feet, reporting that Orcus was all a Trojan horse. It was the machines that were plotting against everyone. The AI, Nimrod, Omega Sentinel, Moira. They were building a great machine. Sentinel City is rising. Orcus forces begin to attack around the world. Some of the soldiers are protecting a small tugboat for MODOK. The small villain suddenly comes flying through the air, landing on the boat, the leader of the soldiers stepping forward. Been guarding this boat for you. Any word from command? They've all gone silent since the destruction of our great space station, the soldier asks, and MODOK nods, thanking them for guarding his property. He reaches for his wrist computer. Just let me turn this all the way to monster, he says with a sneer, and the guard suddenly falls in pain as his body begins to morph, his bones snapping as his body rearranges itself, and he screams in pain. MODOK laughs as he points out that Orcus gave him all kinds of DNA databases, and even though the AI behind everything, the computer controlling it all, wasn't planning on keeping the humans around, MODOK has big plans for the humans. Today is a day of making art, MODOK cheers. Meanwhile, at the Daily Bugle, Orcus soldiers hold Ben Urich and his reporters at gunpoint, ordering them to retract the story of how evil Orcus is, as Ben is trying to point out the irony of being ordered at gunpoint to say that Orcus isn't evil. The soldiers then suddenly fall to the ground, their bodies twisted into horrific monsters. Everyone scatters as one of the monsters grabs a hold of Ben Urich, the wall suddenly melting and Firestar coming flying in. Hiya, Mr. Urich, she calls as she swoops in and lights the monsters on fire, freeing Ben and hitting the monsters with a blast that knocks it out the window. She then hits her comms, reporting to Kamala that the Orcus soldiers that they've been tracking are all turning into monsters. Down the streets, Kamala is already aware of this situation as she is trying to protect the innocent people from the creatures' attacks. Two of the creatures attack a woman and kids in their car, but Kamala uses her massive hands to push the creatures away. Grab your kid! I'll keep them all for you! She shouts, and Kamala looks in disgust at the monsters that she is holding, feeling their skin in her hands. Ah, gross! This thing is like palming a tumor! She gags, but more of the monsters are now charging down the streets. Luckily, a voice broadcasts through everyone's mind. Good evening, mutants. I've dispatched Wolverine to the Daily Bugle. I bring you the usual mix of hope and bad news. She says, informing everyone that Orcus is falling, but they have been replaced by Nimrod and the machines, and Charles Xavier has now sided with the machines. In the city, Sync slams into one of the creatures, having recently brought down a sentinel. What's the plan to neutralize Charles? But Emma shakes her head, explaining that she needs to keep her plans to herself in case Xavier's reading everyone's minds. Rest assured, top X-Men are on the problem. Elsewhere, Shadowcat has freed Caliban from a secret Orcus prison. Can you hear me? Blink if you can hear me. Kitty says to the mutant tracker, who smiles up at her as he tries to stand. Kitty begins to move, whirling and slashing through another monster. A lot has happened since you've been captured. The Resistance is striking back. Kitty informs Caliban, who looks around the lab, that he was locked in. Were they experimenting on me? Using me? He asks, and Kitty grabs a hold of him, phasing him through the wall, leading him out into an alleyway. Once they're safe for a moment, she turns to Caliban, informing him that she needs him to lead her to Xavier. Then I'm going to put him down, she snaps, but Caliban looks in shock, shaking his head. No, Charles would never help them. He insists, but Kitty informs him of everything that has happened since he's been gone. Meanwhile, Firestar, Kamala, and Laura Kinney have tracked MODOK to his tugboat. From inside the boat, MODOK shouts to the mutants to go away, but Firestar hits the boat with a massive fire blast. I love the smell of napalm MODOK in the morning, she shouts, but MODOK leaps into the air, flying to safety. He fires a beam from his headband while cackling. I have to hand it to you mutants, you're very hard to kill, but MODOK's never really put his back into it, until now! He shouts, but Firestar hits him with another blast, and Sync flies up, punching him hard, breaking through most of his armor. Burned and smoking, MODOK swerves through the sky. Nice punch, but you cannot kill me, I self-repair! He grunts, firing another blast, but this one is blocked by Laura's claws on the ground. She then glances at Sync. Load Polaris, she says with a smile, and he nods, smiling. I got you. Using the magnetic powers to lift Laura and launch her through the air, she slashes through MODOK, finally bringing him down. Luckily, Sync catches her, and they both watch as Kamala begins to pummel the downed MODOK again and again. Kaya! She shouts every time. Back at Little Tokyo, Caliban still refuses to lead Kitty to Xavier, still not believing that the professor would turn on them. I'm sorry, Kitty. Killing anyone, even a traitor, is wrong, Caliban says as he turns away, walking into the rainy night. Kitty stares at him in anger and shock. Coward! I should have left you locked in that lab! She shouts at him, and Caliban pauses for a moment. But Wolverine steps out of the shadows. It's okay, Caliban. You can go. I'm here. She won't be alone. He stalks towards Kitty. Glad you got to see that, she says softly, and Logan shrugs. I've seen worse. Tears begin to stream from her eyes as she explains that learning that Xavier betrayed them, even to save mutantkind, broke her. Logan nods, putting a hand on her shoulder. Dreams die, kiddo. Sometimes when they do, you take the dreamer with you, he says, and Kitty draws her sword, looking down at it, seeing her reflection. She admits that she regrets what she had to do since taking up the mantle of Shadowcat again. I thought I could mask up and do what needed to be done without thinking, but I can't. She looks at Logan. If we win and I'm standing, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. After this, no more X-Men. Logan nods, reaching out, taking the sword from her hand. She walks away into the rainy night, lightning crackling over his head as Wolverine nods. Whatever you need, stand down. I got the only help that Charles needs. He pops his claws, holding Kitty's blade. Xavier has to die, or none of us will be safe. Just so you guys are aware, X-Men 35 now jumps to the end of the entire story, where everything has been resolved, except Xavier. Now we begin. The convoy moved through the darkness of the woods, a large metal cell on its largest truck. The lead vehicles are hit by tire spikes spinning off into the woods, Wolverine leaping out of the shadows, his claws sinking into the large truck's engine, bringing it to a stop. If you're listening, I'll see you in a minute, Chuck! Wolverine growls as he slashes through the armed guards in minutes. Inside of the cell, Xavier is waiting, claws ripping through the side, screeching through the metal as Logan slowly cuts his way in. He pulls apart the metal, glaring at his former mentor. Hello, Chuck, he growls, moving forward, raising his claws. You got anything to say to me? Anything to make me retract these claws and walk away? Charles doesn't respond, and Logan nods his head, preparing for the strike. Right then! He moves fast, but his claws stop inches from Charles' heart, and he can't move anymore. Oh! Let me do what I gotta do! He bellows, but a voice responds. No, Magneto says, lifting Logan out of the cell. No more martyrs, Logan. His life is not yours to end. Charles finally opens his eyes. If you would excuse us, Logan, I'd like to talk to my old friend. Charles says, and with a flick of his hand, Magneto sends Logan flying away into the woods. He lifts the cell into the air, and the two of them float away. As they hover over the forest, Eric sits, removing his helmet. Charles, how did we get here? Eric asks, and as the two speak, discussing the follies of Krakoa and their dreams, Eric admits that Krakoa was what he always wanted. But now he sees that setting up a mutant nation against mankind was the wrong answer. It didn't work. In embracing the world's power, I've turned my back on the world, and I won't do it again. Eric explains, but he now realizes that whether it's human or mutant, whether people are oppressed by power or simply because of who they are, we face the same enemy, and we must destroy that enemy together. Charles smiles at him, explaining that Eric finally has begun to believe in the world that Charles always dreamed of. After everything, now you turn to me and say that Xavier was right. He says with a smirk, looking at Eric, at Magneto, knowing that his old friend has finally chosen a good fight. He suddenly looks up smiling as he senses it. The return of Krakoa. The Krakoa that was. Back on the island, Doug waves his hand as the island appears, and Kafka comes walking down. Is this a relief? I felt the distant call for weeks, so I came. I was worried I was losing it. Doug says as he greets the older mutant. I'm Kafka of the Quiet Council, the older Kafka says, explaining that the council doesn't rule from where he's from. They listen. He explains that they have finally returned because some of the Krakoans missed their world, while others chose to stay. Plus, our Krakoa insisted. We weren't going to leave your Krakoa behind, he says as he motions behind him. Doug smiles as the physical manifestation of Krakoa walks forward, greeting the piece that was left behind. They need to be reproduced. Could you do the honors? Kafka asks, and Doug smiles at both of the islands. I'd love to. He holds out his hands and the two join once again. Hours later, Emma and the X-Men return, surprised to see the part of Krakoa that was lost to the White Hot Room. Are we watching Island Sex? Emma asks Doug telepathically, but Doug just smiles on the beach. Absolutely not. Everyone should come down and explore. So the X-Men join Kafka in the chamber of the Quiet Council, with Exodus greeting the boy that he had left behind on Krakoa in the White Hot Room. Little Kafka, you've grown. It's good to see you, Exodus says as he walks forward, hugging the man. Emma is shocked as it's revealed that they left weeks ago, but it has been 15 years for those who were left behind in Krakoa. Was it hard? Scott asks and Kafka nods, smiling. Yeah, but it was also perfect. We had 4. We had the cradle. We had the database. We had time and hope. He then motions to the city, and Emma stares in awe, realizing that they brought back everyone that had been lost when Krakoa fell. All of the mutants that had been lost to Genosha. All 15 million. The children, they brought them all back, she says quietly as Kafka nods, standing by her. All we need is to be left alone. Those that want to return through the gates, return to the families that they left behind. Jean comes forward asking about hope, and Kafka explains that hope is both alive and dead, that she lives in Krakoa as a metaphor and the truth all in one, that she is the home of the Phoenix which resides in the White Hot Room, and then he sighs. It's hard to be away from that presence though. It's good to get back. Exodus is surprised, assuming that they would have stayed, but Kafka shakes his head, explaining that the White Hot Room is where they and Krakoa belong now. Earth isn't ready for us, but Exodus is angered, believing that mutantkind needs Krakoa. But Kafka shakes his head. I'm sorry, Exodus, but it's what we want. Krakoa is getting ready to leave. 24 hours will start counting until... He begins to explain, but power begins to boil off of Exodus and he lashes out. The X-Men rushing to stop him as Kafka flees, afraid, but still understanding why he's mad. This kind of thing is exactly why we're leaving, he says quietly. He turns to see a gate open and the mighty Apocalypse step out. Speak, brother mutant. Tell me what occurs. Apocalypse says, and Kafka quickly explains that Exodus is fighting the mutants, that he doesn't want Krakoa to leave. He thinks that they can talk some sense into him, but Apocalypse steps past him. Perhaps, but the time of talking has passed. He can think through his errors of passion if he lives. Apocalypse enters the council chamber, ordering Exodus to stand down, and Exodus fires a blast at him. But Apocalypse charges forward, grabbing a hold of the holy mutant, slamming him hard into the ground, pummeling him. The mutants look in shock at the ferocity of the attack, but Apocalypse then turns to Kafka. So, Speaker of Krakoa, show me what my children have built. Apocalypse orders. Kafka leads him through the city, explaining that they have built what was based on the mutants' teachings on Earth. But the Krakoans have moved beyond that, moved beyond what was established before Krakoa left the Earth. We don't blame you. You had bigger problems to worry about. Kafka says as he shows them how they have moved past the anger and hatred of the Earthbound mutants, though he does admit that some wish to stay behind. That even though they are at peace in the White Hot Room, some can't move beyond the earthly world. He shows them statues created by the Krakoan wood, built to commemorate all of the things that the Krakoans have moved beyond, both good and bad. And Apocalypse shakes his head. But I am your past, your bloody history. Am I so easily reduced to sculpted wood? Do my hard lessons no longer apply to your white, hot heaven? Apocalypse questions as he stares at the statue, and Kafka shakes his head. Not the way you taught them here. Survival of the fittest isn't who's the strongest, but survival of the best fit, Kafka says, telling Apocalypse that they have moved beyond this, and he holds up his hand to Apocalypse. We don't think you did badly, but the gravity of what you call human thinking was impossible to escape. You have within us the space to become this, and we are eternally thankful. Our children will be thankful. Apocalypse stares at the offered hand. You reject your most radical ideas and say this. Kafka shakes his head again. Absolutely not. We respect everything that you did as steps along the way, but your ideas weren't radical enough. Apocalypse nods and takes the mutant's hand, but then he lifts him and brings him crashing into the ground. You were right. My ideas were not radical enough. I was far too lenient, so there will now be pain. He rumbles, the mutants moving to stop him, but Apocalypse merely knocks them away. He believes that mutantkind can still rise up, that he has done so much for them, and his teachings will not merely be pushed to the side. As the mutants begin their battle with Apocalypse, Kafka gets to his feet, asking that Apocalypse calm down, but the godly mutant turns his gaze upon him. I am not angry. I am simply Apocalypse, and mere survival was never enough, for we are meant for greater things. But you do not have the proper leadership. Once more, I must bear the load. For I am Apocalypse. The revelation is unending. And if you hate me for what I must reveal, know that I love you, as I always have, even as I break you, he says as he turns and prepares to assault the X-Men. Meanwhile, far overhead, Doom stands with Volta on the deck of his ship, looking down at Krakoa as the battle continues. A much larger island has arrived. I would like to add its secrets to my own garden, Doom says, and he turns to Volta, ordering her to retrieve a seed from the island, but not to be seen. She bows her head, readying her spear. It shall be done, she says as she leaps from the ship, descending into the forest. She picks one of the seeds, but looks up to see a young mutant looking at her and pauses. Hello, young one. I was not here, do you understand? The young mutant nods and Volta smiles, returning to Doom, giving him the seed. Were you seen? She shakes her head. Not even by the island. Meanwhile, the battle continues. Beast, Iceman, and Scott launch into an assault, but are turned away. Sunfire launching a blazing fire at Apocalypse, but is knocked away. The strength of Colossus gives Apocalypse pause, but it is not enough, and with one blow, Apocalypse sends Colossus into the Krakoan tree. Do not rise again, unless it is to my banner. Apocalypse rumbles as he stalks forward, standing over the fallen Colossus, calling out to the people of Krakoa, demanding to know who will stand at his side. Who will shape mutantdom for the next generation? Ask yourselves. I have been hard on you, yes, but have I lied? Apocalypse demands. He looks down as no one approaches him, and Wolverine steps out of the crowd, his claws already popped. You oppose me? Logan smiles, nodding. Yeah. The kids have spoken, old man. He says, charging forward and slashing Apocalypse through the throat. But Apocalypse shrugs. You can't kill me. Logan nods, stabbing again. Can't kill you, but you're gonna feel the pain. Apocalypse grabs him by the arms, stabbing him with his own claws, and in a puff of brimstone, Logan is bamfed away. Do not impede me, Nightcrawler! Apocalypse rumbles, and Kurt appears behind him again, trying to talk sense into the mutant god. It is your softness that led us into this ruin. Apocalypse rumbles, but Kurt reaches for his eyes, pulling them out and then bamfing them away. But Apocalypse, without his eyes, seems unfazed. I have fought in the darkness longer than you can imagine, he says, looking up at Emma's approach as she reaches into his mind. But Apocalypse knocks her away. But Jean appears next, trying to convince Apocalypse, explaining that the Krakoans have lived in peace for 15 years, and that they have known no persecution or have been hunted. That they have no need for Apocalypse and the X-Men. Touch their minds, witness them, Emma offers. They link his mind with those that Krakoa has brought back, and Apocalypse's eyes widen in shock. I see millions of mutant minds. I see that my magic has brought us to this moment. That it holds no sway over this undiscovered country, he says softly before disappearing. The battle has ended. Peace reigns on the island once more as Krakoa prepares to leave once more. Scott and the other X-Men gather on the beach, and Kurt waits for them. This is the last time I'll ask. Kurt, how is Krakoa? Nightcrawler looks with a smile. Ready for the next adventure, Scott, wherever it may lead. Kurt tells him, and the mutants gather and watch, tears in their eyes, as they watch Krakoa lift into the sky and disappear back into the white-hot room. The mutant paradise at peace, far from the hateful eyes of the world. And so ends the first Krakoan Age. Apocalypse returned to Arakko. There he looked up into the stars, pondering his future, wondering if the future had slipped from his fingers. What is left to be done here and now? Perhaps it's time to pass such questions to another. Perhaps I should choose an heir. Mother Righteous is sitting in her cell in the Orcus base, but she has not been left to rot. In her cell appears Dr. Stasis, who promised to come to her. He leads her into the corridor smiling, but Mother Righteous looks at him in fear as his arm transforms into a blade. Do you recognize this? You made Mystique stab Destiny with it, the woman she loved. That was a mistake. Dr. Stasis says, Mother Righteous's eyes widening as Dr. Stasis suddenly transforms into Mystique before his eyes. Meanwhile, Charles Xavier is sitting in his cell, locked away from the rest of the world. Or is he? What his former friends Tony Stark and Reed Richards have failed to realize was that he suddenly pushed their minds, giving him a back door, a way to look out into the world, a subtle change to things, to push minds in the right direction. He watches as a mutant woman leaves a bar. A Mankind First believer following her with a knife. He's about to attack, but Charles pushes. The man drops his knife, unsure of why he doesn't attack, and instead he goes to the top of a tall building and teeters on the edge. Charles is trapped, but he'll make the best of it. His mind leaves his body, walking the world. He checks in on his X-Men. Scott and Hank are looking for a new base of operations in Alaska. Rogue and Gambit are enjoying each other's company in Mexico City. Kitty is now a bartender enjoying her life. Logan seeks the solitude of the world. Kamala Khan enjoys her city. Alex Summers questions his place in the world now, and Aurora takes her place in the United Nations, helping to shape and lead the world. At the edge of Shi'ar space, Charles finds Jean using her vast powers to help stabilize an entire galaxy, and he wonders if he did the right thing. But seeing the things that he helped shape, he knows the answer. At his cell, his body suddenly falls forward, no brain activity present. The guards rush into the room, taking all precautions, but Xavier doesn't respond. 2 years later, Xavier is being moved into a coma unit, his body being kept alive by machines. The guards don't seem worried, certain that Xavier will never wake up. But as they bump along the country road, his eyes suddenly open.
And there you have it, the conclusion to the fall of X and the Krakoan era. Sadly, this was Benny's final X-Men audio, but I'm so thankful that he was able to cover this entire event for you all. Let us know in the comments down below what you thought of this video. What do you thought of the fall of X and the Krakoan Age in general? And of course, like, subscribe, and we will see you next time. Rest in peace, Benny.